In a small-town high school, Elijah sits in silence, scarred from a fire that stole his childhood. His classmates mock him from a distance, their cruelty hidden behind nervous laughter. Teachers avert their eyes, pity replacing courage. Elijah swallows loneliness like medicine, but inside burns a storm of shame and rage. Each day deepens his longing to be seen for who he is, not for the scars etched across his face. The classroom buzzed with chatter, pencils tapping, sneakers squeaking on the tiled floor. At the very back, near the window that always stuck halfway open, Elijah sat alone. His chair scraped against the wall, as if even furniture understood the rule. No one sat beside the burned boy. The scars ran jagged across his cheek and down his neck, a map of fire that the world refused to forget. Some whispered that just looking at him could give you nightmares. Others laughed when he passed, their voices sharp as broken glass. "Don't get too close," one boy hissed once, loud enough for Elijah to hear. "You might catch it." Laughter followed, nervous but cruel. The teacher, Mrs. Daniels, froze mid-lesson, her eyes flicking to Elijah before sliding away. She never said a word. No one ever did. The silence of adults was louder than the taunts of children. Elijah pressed his hands into the desk, willing himself invisible. He had learned long ago that fighting back only made the mockery worse. So he endured, stone-faced on the outside, storming on the inside. At lunch, he sat at the far corner of the cafeteria, his tray untouched. He could feel the weight of their stares, the way their laughter sharpened when he lifted his fork. Some days, they left notes folded into his locker, drawings of monsters with melted faces. On others, they simply ignored him, which sometimes hurt even more. The fire had taken his home, his mother, and half his childhood. But the school took what little dignity he had left. One afternoon, during history class, a paper airplane landed on his desk. He unfolded it. In jagged black ink, someone had scrawled, "Ashes don't belong among the living." His throat tightened, but he said nothing. Mrs. Daniels glanced at him, then turned back to the chalkboard as if she hadn't seen. Every day, Elijah carried two weights, the memory of flames and the fresh burn of humiliation. And yet, under the pain, something else stirred, a question that never left him. How long will I let them decide who I am? He didn't have an answer, not yet. All he had was the silence, the whispers, the endless empty seat beside him, until the day someone new walked in. The morning sunlight slanted through dusty blinds when the classroom door creaked open. Conversations faltered. Heads swiveled. In walked a girl none of them had ever seen before. Amelia. Her presence filled the space like a sudden chord in a silent room. Her uniform was crisp, her movements graceful, her confidence unshakable. Rumor had already spread. She was the daughter of the reclusive billionaire who had bought the old mansion on the hill. Every student watched as she scanned the room for an empty seat. There were plenty. Every row had gaps, but the one glaring vacancy sat beside Elijah, the seat that had stayed untouched for years, as though cursed. Eyes darted from her to him, daring her to notice. Elijah kept his gaze locked on the desk, heat crawling up his neck. He braced himself for the familiar pause, the inevitable shift to anywhere else. He knew the script. Everyone always did. But Amelia didn't move toward the safe rows. She walked straight to him. The shuffle of her footsteps was deafening. Whispers erupted. "She's not gonna— No way. She doesn't know—" Then the scrape of the chair. She sat down. Right beside him, Elijah's heart thudded in his chest. For a moment he thought maybe she hadn't seen. Maybe she didn't know what sat behind the scars. Then she turned to him and smiled. "Hi," she said softly, as though greeting an equal, not a ghost. "I'm Amelia." It wasn't pity. It wasn't fear. Her tone was ordinary, normal, in a world that had never been normal for him. Elijah swallowed. "Elijah," he murmured, the word fragile on his tongue. The class buzzed louder. Some laughed under their breath. Others leaned forward, waiting for her to flinch. She didn't. She pulled out her notebook, adjusted her pen, and leaned back like it was the most natural thing in the world. The teacher cleared her throat, continuing the lesson, but the classroom had already shifted. Elijah could feel the eyes boring into his back, the confusion, the envy, the disbelief. For once, it wasn't just ridicule. They were watching him with curiosity, and for the first time, Elijah wasn't invisible. He kept glancing at her, trying to catch the trick, waiting for her to recoil, for the smile to fade, for the mask to slip. But it didn't. She scribbled notes, tapped her pencil, and asked him once if he had an extra sheet of paper. He handed it to her with trembling fingers. She said, "Thanks, Elijah," like she meant it, and in that fragile, Ordinary moment, the world cracked open. For a brief week, Elijah lived in a world he had almost forgotten. A world where someone spoke to him without wincing. Where Elijah sounded like a name again, not a curse. He guarded it fiercely, like a candle flickering in the wind. But cruelty does not sleep for long. It began with whispers. Jeers muttered when Amelia passed in the hall, eyes cutting at her like knives. "Billionaire Barbie and her monster," someone sneered. The words hit Elijah harder than they hit her. He wanted to warn her, to tell her to stay away before the wolves closed in. But every time she smiled at him, steady and unshaken, he swallowed the warning back. Then came the prank. It was Friday, the air thick with the restless energy before the weekend. Elijah sat at his desk, shoulders hunched, Amelia beside him flipping through her notebook. When he opened his bag, something wet and rancid spilled onto the floor. Rotting food, smashed into the pages of his books, oozing across the tiles. The class erupted. Laughter roared, sharp and merciless. Someone shouted, "Careful! Don't burn the place down this time!" Another voice chimed in, "Guess ashes belong with garbage." Elijah froze, the smell clawing up his throat, his vision blurring. It was worse than fire, worse than pain. Humiliation swallowed him whole. He wanted to disappear, to shrink into nothing. His hands trembled as he tried to gather the ruined papers, but the laughter only swelled. Then, Amelia stood. Her voice sliced through the noise. "Enough!" The room went still. She glared at the crowd, her eyes blazing with something Elijah had never seen in anyone before. Not pity, not fear, but fury. "You think this is funny? You think cruelty makes you powerful?" Her words cracked against the walls. "It makes you pathetic." Silence spread, uncomfortable and raw. A few students looked away, shame creeping in. Others clenched their jaws, unwilling to be exposed. Amelia crouched beside Elijah, helping him pick up the mess, her hands unflinching even as the stench coated her fingers. "Don't," Elijah whispered, broken. "They'll turn on you too. Let them," she answered. "I don't care." Her defiance lit something inside him, a spark buried beneath years of ash. The fire wasn't gone. It had only been waiting. But sparks are dangerous things. The town hadn't changed much. The cracked sidewalks, the faded diner signs, the same old houses leaning against time. But Elijah had changed. The boy who once hid behind scars now stepped from a sleek car in a tailored suit, every stride deliberate, every breath his own. The invitation had come weeks earlier, a request for him to speak at the high school assembly. At first he almost refused. The weight of memory still clung to those halls. But something in him whispered that this was the moment. Not for revenge, but for release. The gymnasium was packed, rows of students fidgeting on the bleachers. Teachers lined the walls, older now, their faces sagging with years. And there, at the front, stood Elijah. Some recognized him instantly. Whispers rippled across the room, the same kind of whispers that had once gutted him. But this time he didn't shrink. He let them look. Let them see. He adjusted the microphone. His voice carried steady, low, yet firm. "My name is Elijah Carter. Some of you may remember me. Some of you won't. But I remember this place. I remember the whispers. I remember the laughter. I remember what it felt like to walk through these halls with scars the world decided would define me." The gym fell silent. Even the restless students leaned forward. I used to believe those scars were chains, that they made me less. But one day, someone sat beside me. Just one person. She didn't see a monster. She saw a boy who deserved to be treated like anyone else. That kindness, it changed the course of my life. His throat tightened, but he pressed on. "You don't know the power you hold when you choose how to treat someone. A word can cut deeper than fire. A laugh can haunt longer than pain. But a gesture, just a seat beside someone no one else will touch, that can light a path out of darkness." For a moment, the silence was absolute. And then, applause. It began tentatively, then grew, echoing through the gym like thunder. Some clapped with tears in their eyes. Others clapped out of shame. But all clapped. Elijah didn't smile in triumph. He smiled in peace. He had come full circle, not to bury the past, but to honor the spark that had once saved him.